But first, Shay Brown is a trans man and director of Transaxial, the organisation I mentioned. And you say this is just doing harm.
Yeah, and you know, following on from the news about the guides is news today from the Women's Institute.
That's right.
They're also feeling like they've got no choice but to exclude trans women from membership. And you know what we're talking about here is going along to guides or brownies and getting involved in activities, social activities. What's the issue?
It's just, do they call this a Mott and Bailey thing? Anyway, they just throw out these general statements. Like, we're talking about just people wanting to go and take part in activities. Like, that's not the point. The point is that it's supposed to be for women. And these men, no matter how strongly they believe they're women, they're just not. That's the point. Otherwise, they can change their charter and their branding to mixed sex, and then people can decide whether they want to attend or not. Now, I think that would be devastating because it's just further breakdown of single-sex spaces. But they just don't get it. They just don't. They just think, oh, but you're just being nasty. No, that's not the point. It's like saying, I have to try and stay calm here. It's like saying, you know, we have 18-year-old football for boys. And for years, we've just been letting this one kid who's, you know, 12, 13, 14 take part because there's no football for that age, as no one wants to play football at that age. And it's just being nice. You know, I think a lot of people would agree that that's just not appropriate because there are different age gaps. And if it's for a particular age, then it should be. Otherwise, it's just for any age. And that's what we're talking about. We're not saying that 14-year-old boy is not allowed to enjoy football or, you know, we have to discriminate against him and he can never play football. Categories matter. Sometimes categories matter and sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes ethnicity is useful to point out. I think most of the time it's not. But there are times when we need to correctly label things and correctly distinguish things. Otherwise, it is very difficult for us to talk about things in a meaningful way. Right?
Well, I guess the Supreme Court is the issue. Once they said, look, if you are born a man, you're a man. That's kind of the end of it.
Interesting to see like that on the BBC. They would have never said that before. And he plays devil advocate, but I just feel like none of those presenters would have had the balls to even put that out there.
Girl Guides have been proudly trans inclusive for years, and they're not making decisions like this because they want to exclude people. They're making decisions like this because they feel like they've got no choice. And this is really...
Well, the ones that are brave enough to come out, not brave enough, but it is still not socially acceptable for the institutions to celebrate the news. But I have no doubt there's going to be lots of women involved who are happy about it. I do think we're at the stage now where more and more of these people need to speak up and say, I'm actually happy about this. It's the same thing when we saw loads of companies ditch their DEI policies after Trump came in and his executive orders. They were all, it's with a heavy heart, we have to do this. We've always been for inclusion. You know, I would have liked to see some companies say, listen, we still believe in the foundations of equality and treating people equally and not discriminating. But actually, we recognize how some of these policies have gone too far. And now we're actually discriminating against, you know, white people as a result of it. And ultimately, we think, you know, we're going to move forward. This is not going back. This is going on, you know, progressing to the next stage. No one is doing that. They're all saying it's out of our hands because they're cowards. You know, that's true. I bet there's people who agree with this and they just don't have the balls to say. And women in that scenario, you better get those balls because we need you.
Really showing now the chilling impacts that Supreme Court ruling and things that have followed from the EHRC are having on people's lives, trans or otherwise.
But isn't it more the other way around, that at some point about 10, 15 years ago, for whatever reason, groups like Stonewall started to say we need to campaign for proper established rights for trans people so that their rights are recognised, and as is famously being said, trans rights are human rights. And at that point, without realising it, they started an enormous battle, and essentially you've lost it. The battle has been lost here.
Very good. He is, you know, he's playing both sides, but for all the faults of Jeremy Vine and his bicycle shenanigans, I have to agree. with this. People do not understand how successful Stonewall and activist charities have been infiltrating institutions and taking a top-down approach to changing policy and changing how we talk about these issues. People think it's just the new gay rights. It's not. Gay rights was primarily a grassroots movement, from the people upwards, instead of just at a top-down HR level, that kind of thing. So they are completely different. And these things snuck under, they came through by the back door. And if we had been presented it clearly from the beginning and in a democratic way, I don't think people would have been for it. If they were given the moment in history to sit down and meaningfully think about this and the implications, I think that we would have come to the decision we've come to now.
I don't see that trans people asking to be treated fairly in society and equally we can't be blamed for backlash about wanting to be treated fairly and equally. That's
such bullshit. I mean, again, it's not about blaming just individuals, but the movement has got what it's coming for them, It's not just about the lie and us having to appease a lie. It's about sterilizing kids. It's about physically altering people's bodies that regret it. Men winning Olympic medals in women's sports. Like, you guys have I said this in my last video, you've just taken it so far. And there are people who identify as trans, Blair White, who just have been ringing this alarm bell for years, and they totally agree with that. So honestly, some self-reflection, these people just need to understand how to self-reflect and realize, well, maybe we should have done that differently, or maybe we could have done that differently. Maybe we did ask for a bit too much, but they just put everything down to, we're just asking to be treated fairly. Well, if you're asking to be treated fairly, we shouldn't have to lie to you, because I don't have to lie to firemen and say, you're a fireman, but I believe you're a Spider-Man. That was a stupid analogy. In order for men to be treated equally, saying that some of them are women and entertaining that is actually not treating them equally. It's giving them special privileges. And I'm sorry for people who find that upsetting, who find it nasty and mean. But sometimes, life is just full of uncomfortable truths. Sometimes you have to say unpopular things. Sometimes you have to be honest with people and say, you are shite at the piano. I don't think you're going to be a professional pianist. That's just it. But there's something else that you can be great at. It's just like that kind of thing. It's brutal honesty. Sometimes we tell white lies to people, or we don't share our full, deep thoughts about something because it's unnecessarily cruel. But there are times when you have to. And I think this is one of those times.
Shay was just saying, don't we want to be a society where people socialise with each other?
Of course we do, but there are plenty of mixed-sex charities. It's just an obvious...
Do you recognise that voice?
...fact that if you have a single-sex charity, it has to be single-sex. I find it extraordinary that somebody who's not of the sex for a particular charity would think that it's the right place for them in the first place. They should go and join a mixed-sex group. There are loads of them.
But if they want to be in the Girl Guides because they feel that they are girls...
But they're not. I want to be in a zoo because I feel like I'm a giraffe, but I'm not. I don't think they're going to put me in a cage or behind the glass in the zoo. Do you?
I understand that. But, with the best will in the world, I can't make them into girls. Nature made them not girls. This is like magical thinking, what Shay is describing. A boy is a boy. And even before the Supreme Court ruling, the case was that no boy legally ever counted as a girl. We have never had gender self-ID in this country. The Supreme Court was just about gender recognition certificates, which only adults can get. This should literally never have happened in the first place. Charities are meant to serve their charitable objects, and both Girl Guiding and Women's Institute were set up solely to serve female people.
What about the argument, Helen, that you are technically 100% right, but also sound a little unkind?
I'm being kind to the 50% of humanity that's female. Not all girls and women want single-sex spaces, but a very large number do. And they deserve what they have, not taken away from them, and not taken away from them by stealth like this. There are so many trans-only charities and organisations and groups. There are so many mixed-sex ones. Why destroy the tiny number of things that are just for women and girls?
Props to Helen Joyce once again. So she summed up a lot of stuff I've already said, and she puts it better than me. So I don't need to analyze all of that. But I'm very glad to see her being welcomed onto mainstream stuff like the BBC more lately. They would have never done that before. And you can see her trying to remain patient when he's saying, what about the fact that what you're saying is true, but it's unkind? It's just such a stupid question. Anyway, what it's like, well, if you find it unkind, that's your problem, not mine. But also, I think a lot of the feminists or gender critical or whatever you want to call them, people who are campaigning for this, it's always phrased about like, but what about the poor trans person? What about them? Do you not feel like you're being mean? Why do they never ask? What do you say to all the women out there who feel silenced, stifled, discriminated against all these years because they basically believed in something quite reasonable? I want to hear that question asked. We can feel sorry for the trans-identified people who are upset. That's fine. We can have a space to talk about that. But that's always what they lead with. It's never, this must have been really difficult for women, or talk about the issues you faced in speaking out against this, all the death threats you get from activists. Are trans people getting death threats from these women? No. They might, I don't know, maybe crazy right-wingers or something, but not from this group.
I also grew up with a lot of people in my life who are part of the LGBT community, and I
just want us to get away from saying this, because when she says LGBT community, she's including me. That acronym is just so old and dead. It feels dated. We should be talking about these groups in a distinct way. Charities and organizations can say what they want, but when we actually are referring to groups saying, I grew up with LGBTQ people, what do you mean? Did you grow up with gay people? Did you grow up with trans-identified people? Did you grow up with girls who said they were non-binary? Because these groups are just, I have nothing in common with some of these people. I'm sick of it. Stop the forced teaming.
I think that it's a real shame to trans girls who would like a safe space to explore being a girl and experience such a lovely aspect of being a girl that doesn't discriminate. That's the lovely thing about Girl Guidance, is that it's not about ability, it's not about being good at a sport or being able to sing. It gives children, and particularly girls, the opportunity to try new.
Yeah, it may not be about that, but it's about being female. Why don't these people get it? This is just railing against the human condition. And I think people need something to believe in. And they're desperate to believe that there's such a thing as males who are born, but we're always meant to be female. There's just no scientific evidence this is a real thing. There's people who believe in it. And what does this mean? Like a space to explore what it feels like to be a girl. They're not girls. Don't know how many times I have to say it. I can have a safe space exploring what it's like to be a Galaxy chocolate bar. I can roll around in chocolate and I can be smooth and put myself in a wrapper, but I'm not Galaxy chocolate. All right? Not any chocolate. Oh, I'm feeling really weird today.
Things and go on trips, and maybe children who wouldn't necessarily get to, learn.
Yeah, go on.
I'm just being given the same opportunity to explore that safely.
Right,
as well.
Gotcha. Sorry to interrupt. I was trying to work out the relevance, but I see what you say on that. But the last guest, Helen Joyce, was saying, well, look, you can find another organisation which isn't girls only to...
I understand that, but if girls need a safe space to explore these things, I think trans girls need that just as much, if not even more so.
Even more so. That's rich. And this is coming from a woman. Women have a history in society of protecting men sometimes. It's just true. And men have a history of abusing women. And that is just the reality. This is just another manifestation of that.